everybody. Welcome to Everyone Talks to Liz. I'm so glad you can join us because I'm in a little bit of a tizzy waiting, like, I guess, every single Gen X, Y, Z, and whatever that's out there right now to see if TikTok is going to live. Yeah, we do expect that the fate of everybody under 24 years old is going to be in tears as the clock ticks down on the fate of the Chinese video app. But we want to give you this. According to SEMrush, web searches, you ready, for is TikTok shutting down rose more than 10,000% when word got out that President Trump was looking to ban the app. This was in July. Now, if you watch the Cleveland Countdown on Fox Business, you know that Charlie Gasparino and I have been rocking this story, all things TikTok, watching it every minute, breaking news right and left, because we do things a little differently. This time around, what we're going to do is chat about the future of TikTok and the state of the economy as we inch closer and closer to Election Day. So it's the Liz and Charlie show, which you know, Charlie, that I've wanted to actually do a show that you and I anchored.
Oh, that would be great.
Wouldn't that be fun?
I don't know if it passed the FCC obscenity mandates or
Well, I'm wondering
rules.
if we did it streaming, maybe there would be a little bit of latitude or something.
Yeah,
besides.
because the FCC and we could get away with it because the FCC doesn't rule on streaming and actually doesn't rule on cable, so we could actually do it.
That's right.
I don't know if Fox would let us do it. We might. There's a family network, but
My sister, her first job in Hollywood, she's a Hollywood producer, television, and she was working for Aaron Spelling Productions, and she would come home every day with news stories of how the network censors were rejecting certain things from the Dynasty scripts. I mean, how bad could Dynasty have been? And the network censors were saying no. Yeah.
Well, it was a lot of tongue-in-cheek, romance and sexual stuff. I could see that. And, but, and it was the 1980s, right? Dynasty? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Dallas, Dynasty, all those exciting shows.
Love those shows.
Boy. All right. I got to get first to the TikTok situation. Number one, where do we stand? And knowing that people may be dipping in and out of this podcast over the next couple of days, we do remind people it's a moving target, but it has been since late July when President Trump just summarily broke news that he was going to ban this app that up until then a lot of people had not heard about, and that is TikTok, the short form video app.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about it. I knew my niece was into it. Oracle, came off its lows today, but it was down today. It was in the red. And that's important, obviously, because Oracle is trying to work out a deal where they at least get into a joint venture with them and license the algorithm to save it. What's interesting about this story, Liz, and I know people are sick of it. I'm kind of sick of it. We talk about it so much, but it is fascinating to follow because it involves obviously high finance. It involves tech. It also involves social media, which is fascinating. And it also involves national security. If you believe the Trump administration that TikTok, it's owned by ByteDance, a Chinese company, it was stealing the data of its users, your kids, my niece and nephew.
Which is what the president has said he worries about, although he's offered no evidence so far.
No evidence on that it's using that for surveillance purposes. Again, I'm not saying I agree with that, but if you believe that, the structure that they have now with Oracle, remember, Microsoft was going to buy it, right? Own it, pay $20 billion, $30 billion for it, own it, own the algorithm, be able to do whatever it wanted with the algorithm to make sure it was safe. That got scuttled for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think the ByteDance's major investors, General Atlantic and Sequoia, this is my opinion, I don't think they wanted that deal. They want to IPO this and make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So they weren't crazy about it. The Chinese then came in and put out those new export rules. They got mad at the U.S. for sticking their nose in President Trump for sticking his nose in the middle of TikTok, demanding a very large payment for the sale to Microsoft. They came in and they said, listen, if you're going to do that to us, we're going to do this to you. We're going to put in new export rules, which make it nearly impossible to buy TikTok from the Chinese, or at least the algorithm.
And the intellectual property, just to be clear, what the Chinese came through with at almost the 11th hour of round 1, 2, 3, I've lost count, was that if a certain intellectual property, idea, algorithm, creation happened on Chinese ground, the government says, hold on. We want to hold on to that. This is the pride of China, and that would fall under the guise, because you're looking at this customized content, where if you go on TikTok and you say, I like short form videos of cats taking on bigger dogs, the algorithm actually starts to aggregate that for you.
That's me. That's why they got all sorts of stuff on me in China about that. But yes, you're absolutely right. And so Microsoft only wanted to own it, so they didn't want to do the thing. And the bright minds at General Atlantic, at Sequoia, and ByteDance got together, and they found that Oracle was a willing participant in something not exactly a sale. And who wouldn't be? Oracle's going to make if this thing goes through, Oracle's going to make a ton of money. They're going to manage the cloud. They're going to own a piece of this when it goes public. The Chinese are going to like still own the algorithm and make out like bandits if there's an IPO. Who wouldn't like that? Well, as we kept reporting, more and more people started saying, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't live up to what Donald Trump initially said. President Trump initially said there's no Chinese involvement. They can't own it. Well, they essentially do still own the company now. So he started getting second thoughts even after approving it on Saturday, in I guess nominally approving it in concept. And then the Chinese weighed in and say, oh, well, if you don't want it, if you're going to do that, we may not want it to be sold. So it's a mess now. I mean, the latest I heard is that, yes, there's a recalculation inside the White House on what to do. And the companies are working, trying to figure out a structure that they could thread the needle. And whether this could ever happen is beyond me. I don't know. For all I know, it's going to happen in 10 minutes. But I didn't hear that.
Let's give listeners a window into how you and I do our jobs. You have a set of sources, and those sources then speak to other people, who then reach out to you. Same with me, because people have been watching our coverage. Talk about, you don't name them, obviously, but talk about how you've brought together these sources and how they try and game the angle of the story. Because I'm of the belief everyone, including your best sources, are all conflicted. They all want their narrative put out there.
Everybody is conflicted. Listen, the Wall Street, I cover Wall Street. That's my main job. Mm-hmm. What makes Wall Street interesting, my view, is it's not just, dollars and cents and stock market. There's a whole aspect of Wall Street which they want to either influence public policy, or they want to understand public policy to trade on.
I've got a whisper campaign going. When I tell you that I was on the phone, my sources were calling, emailing at all hours of the day and night. And these are good ones, which I find so interesting. And half of them will write and say, hey, Liz, what are you hearing now?
Right. And let's be clear, the companies themselves, everybody that's involved in this, has legions of lobbyists and PR people, and everybody talks to everybody. You know what I'm saying? And that's just the way it goes.
So how do you sift through it and figure out who's just trying to get you to report something that would benefit them?
I've been doing this a long time, so I don't deal in absolutes. And I do have some trusted people that don't lead me astray. So, and you could still get stuff wrong, because this is like an art rather than a science. But you try your hardest. But if you think about it, listen, it's a moving target, so we're not going to be 100%. But we've been pretty much on the money with this story. The uncertainty around it, in particular, the notion that Microsoft had the best hand at buying it. There's no doubt. The notion that this deal, if Oracle does get it, reeks of what's known as crony capitalism. And why is that? I mean, Larry Ellison is very close to Trump. He's going to make a lot of money. Oracle is going to make a lot of money, his company, if this thing goes through. That General Atlantic and Sequoia are, major, the people that run that company, Bill Ford and Doug Leone, respectively, are very plugged into GOP politics. Steve Mnuchin clearly is pushing the deal internally. William Barr, the AG, is clearly not. We were the first to report that. The Journal reported that today. And Mike Pompeo is nominally on the fence, but has spoken up about the national security concerns, and that's stuff that he's the Secretary of State that we were first to report as well. So, that's kind of what we do. And, you try to do the best you can, but knowing that there's no absolutes until you see the press release. And then it's like, when they issue the press release, then it's a done deal.
This is Everyone Talks to Liz, and we'll be right back. Going back to what you were spot on regarding the crony capitalism question, when you reward your political allies with a clear shot at something that doesn't allow better partners, i.e. Microsoft, if you're going on the original request by Donald Trump, that it be sold to an American technology company completely divested of any Chinese ties. So you said we were right, that Oracle stood the best chance. I got to tell you, the first couple of weeks of this story, my sources were saying, it's Microsoft, it's Microsoft, it's Microsoft. Well, that was absolutely true until the goalposts were moved by President Trump.
Yeah. Well, yes. Listen, we were saying it's Microsoft that had the best shot at buying it.
Yes.
When the goalposts moved, and by the way, I should point out, I think the goalposts moved not by Trump necessarily, but by the Chinese. When they issued those export rules that made it would just make it impossible for Microsoft to buy it. Then the goalposts moved, and it was facing a ban. And that's when it got interesting that Trump said, okay, more or less, the White House pushed for a deal that wasn't a total sale. And then you kind of scratch the surface a little bit and you say, well, why are they doing that? Well, then you found out that, you don't have to scratch that hard. This is pretty obvious. Oracle has these plugs in with the administration. ByteDance's two major U.S. investors, again, Sequoia and General Atlantic, are very close, run by big GOPers. So that's where it becomes like, okay, if you're going to do one of these half measures, okay, why is Oracle the one that benefits from the half measures? Think of it this way. If this was all about creating a partnership, not a sale, not totally dislodging it from the Chinese, shouldn't every tech firm get a shot?
Of course.
Why is the government saying it should be Oracle?
It's almost like a no bid contract. And I will say,
that's what it is.
Does anything, true or false, does anything about this deal, this joint venture, ensure national security?
I want to make 2 points, Liz. Number one, a point, though, before I address that. Every administration engages in crony capitalism, so it's not just Trump. You go back to the Obama years. I'm telling you, people benefit that give money. And, so just if, we can, but now we're covering Trump now. Just the Trump administration Obama's not in office. So, and everybody knows about the weird stuff that went on with the Clinton Foundation. So just for the record,
and Dick Cheney's former company and the Iraq War, etc.
You could go back forever. But these are stories that the press needs to talk about. So do we shine the light on it, and then people recalibrate on the notion of national security? I will just say this: if you believe that the Chinese are using TikTok to spy on people, I'm not saying I believe it. As a matter of fact, I until I see evidence, and for some reason I can't get my arms around. I don't really think like they're stealing stuff from my dance videos of my niece. But if you believe that, anything less than a purchase by a U.S. tech provider of the algorithm is, opens the problem still persists. Anything less than that, even if you have lots of people looking over it and tons of scrutiny, you could have done that anyway. You know what I'm saying? The algorithm theoretically is embedded. This was the argument that they used. The Trump people used. The algorithm was embedded with Chinese spyware or whatever. So then you have to say to yourself, what company is really good? And this is where it gets interesting. Like Microsoft is one of the few companies that if you bought that, they could probably peel that apart. Oracle's not known for that, just so you know. You know and I know it. They're not that type of top tier.
Right. And for people who don't really know the TikTok story, there are a minimum of 100 million users in America. In India, 600 million plus.
Yeah, no, it's huge.
And Here's the big underlying story that my sources told me, and that was that President Trump got the idea to ban TikTok when he saw Narendra Modi, the head of India, do that after there was a face-off and a skirmish on the border between India and contested regions there in China. And some Indian soldiers died. They were killed. Yeah. And Modi said, that's it. And he banned 59 apps and all the lookalike apps when it came to TikTok. And that was it. 1 minute it was there, the next it wasn't. Now, Trump's playing a little bit of a game here. He didn't really understand that in America, you have to go through processes. And I don't think he really understood what he was getting into when he said, he could they got to sell it.
He could pass an executive order, which he did, to force the banning of it. But
this isn't a ban.
Well, not now. Well, on November 12th, it could be banned if they don't reach some sort of a deal. Or he can rescind the ban. That's the whole thing. I think what the sort of a lot of people think the instigating factor on Trump was was this Tulsa rally, that somehow TikTokers screwed with that, bought up tickets or made it sound like it was going to be packed. Never showed up. So,
empty seats.
Yeah, so that
embarrassment.
This is his revenge.
Do you remember when President Trump got off Air Force One back in D.C. after the Tulsa rally, and his tie was undone? He looked furious. Do you remember that? The walk?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. And I looked at that and I thought, ooh, TikTokers got him.
Yeah.
And it was shortly thereafter that he said, I want this thing neutralized.
Well, and then he kind of backed himself. The interesting thing is, if he probably played it down a little, the Chinese might have approved one of the iterations of the deal, Microsoft and all that, because I think the Chinese hate losing face. If you stick it in their eye, they're going to. It gets back to their wounds from colonialism. So they're not going to. If you're going to do it to them, watch them do it back to you.
Does any of this have any effect on the election? We're 40 days out from, at least as this taping is happening, from November 3rd, election day. What are you hearing from Wall Street when it comes down to Trump versus Biden?
Here's the sort of interesting thing on Wall Street, and it could at the margins, a lot of people thought like a lot of 12-year-old kids are going to complain to their parents and who are already pissed off at Trump and they might vote against him. But here's the interesting thing about Trump and the polls. If you look at the Real Clear Politic average, and like I'm hearing this on Wall Street a lot, and again, Wall Street follows this stuff because public policy impacts Wall Street and all their machinations, and who's in the White House obviously affects public policy, and who's in the Senate. If you look at the Real Clear Politics average, Trump still is in that band where it's in the margin of error. That for whatever reason, Biden, as bad as Trump is we had a pandemic. He said some wildly crazy stuff about shooting detergent during COVID. Optically, even though policy-wise he didn't do anything crazy, but optically he wasn't very good, and his statements were erratic, but still Biden hasn't closed the deal. And I think what most people are saying on Wall Street is that it's going to come down to the debates. Can Biden hold his own in the debates? And if he does, there's a good chance he's going to win. If he doesn't, well, he hasn't made the complete sale. As bad as Trump has been, he still is in the race. And, he's done. And by the way, we should point out Trump has done some good things which helped his standing. I mean, the economy did not fall off the cliff as bad as it could have, and that thanks to Mnuchin and the Fed and Larry Kudlow, putting together, just throwing money. Which that's when you're supposed to throw money when you have something like this. Right. It was the exact opposite of what they did during the Great Depression, in the run up to the Great Depression. They didn't throw money at. They constricted the economy. They got involved in trade wars. The Fed contracted the money supply.
Smoot-Hawley.
They had a trade war. Herbert Hoover raised taxes. He thought the deficit was bigger than creating jobs. And, we didn't do any of that. We did just the opposite. It was
what I thought was interesting, that I thought that President Trump, if he was going to fight a trade war, the time to do it was when he did it, which is when the economy was very strong. However, I think the real problem is something that people don't feel, and that is the deficit. the ballooning deficit, the ballooning debt, to the point where it's almost like people can't wrap their minds around it. They don't feel it. It's funny money. But our US dollar is losing a lot of air. It is not really looking like the reserve currency of the world. It's not the flight to quality anymore. I just wonder what precipice we're barreling toward that we just don't see.
We've been hearing that for so long that people are so inured by it. They don't grasp it. Like we've been here talking about the deficit, when are we going to have a run on the dollar, and, really when Nouriel Roubini predicted Armageddon pre the 2008 financial crisis, his initial prediction was not about, banking collapse. His initial prediction was, some sort of run on the dollar, as I recall. Yeah. So people have been predicting this for a long time, and it hasn't come to fruition. You understand what I'm saying. As bad as we are, they're a lot worse.
How about this? And it's the cleanest shirt in the laundry basket.
Yeah, that's politically correct, if ever.
Isn't that sweet?
Although, let me tell you something.
So Canadian of me.
But shirts might object to it. The poor shirts. But did they?
Okay, I want two predictions as we finish up. Number one. Will the markets fall off a cliff if Joe Biden is elected president?
There will be a correction, I believe. If Biden is elected, people are going to have to rearrange their stocks. If Biden is elected and there's a Democratic Senate, if there's divided government, I don't think so. Listen, it may correct anyway. I mean, people have to take a deep breath, figure out where we are. I think the real problem is if, one of the things the markets did when Trump was elected, if you remember, people thought, it's Armageddon because he was threatening a trade war. But the market sniffed it out really quick. Republicans kept the Senate, they had the House, and they had Trump. They were going to bring in, tax cuts and pro-business policies. Literally after the futures traded off, they reversed. And the next day they recovered and obviously had a rally based on that. And I think if you have divided government, I don't think it would be so bad. If Joe Biden and the Democrats do win both, just common sense wise, I know the Fed is still inflating the economy. You're still going to have to factor into your portfolio, more regulation, more taxes, capital gains, all that stuff, because they have a blank slate. So that's where I think it gets interesting. You probably will have at least a short-term sell-off.
Okay, and second prediction, TikTok. Does this deal get pushed to after the election? Just to save President Trump from appearing like he retreated from his red line that he drew. That's
what I thought they were going to do last week. When they set that November 12th date, it was like a soft ban, a punt. And then he turned around and said, I want to do it. And
now it's pushed out to a week.
Yeah, I think it's worth it. Is it a week now? I lost track. Yeah. Did they say next week it has to be done?
Yeah, they gave him a 1 week reprieve.
All right. Well, listen, I think this is not something you want to predict. I mean, if you're telling me no Chinese involvement, you can't do this deal. If you're going to back off your initial thing, well then okay, then you're going to be accused of crony capitalism and backing off your initial thing. Yeah. So you tell me what's going to happen.
Well, maybe we'll know September 27th, but something tells me there will be yet another deadline that has been extended. Charlie, it's great to talk to you. And let's think about that show. Okay. I'm not kidding. Okay. I want all kinds of suggestions from our listeners. Here's what I want to do.
Does that mean I have to shave every day?
Yeah, every night. I want this to be prime time. Would you do an 8 p.m. show with me?
I would love to do an 8 p.m. show.
Because that slot is open.
Oh, interesting. Well, I don't make that call. That's above my pay grade.
Charlie, it's great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Our one, our only Charlie Gasparino. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. And by the way, each day, this is a soap opera that you have to check in on. It's better than General Hospital in the 70s. Okay, so you have to watch 3 p.m. Eastern on the Fox Business Network. Charlie saves his big scoops for the Clayman Countdown, so I hope you'll listen. Thanks so much for joining us. Much more to come each week right here on Everyone Talks to Liz. For more podcasts like this, go to foxnewspodcasts.com.